Let's talk about the plague of pornography for just a minute. Wow, this is one of the biggest issues that so many deal with in these latter days, but few talk about it or even know how to talk about it. And when they do talk about it, it's usually in a private setting with a leader who is expected to know how to navigate struggles with pornography. Thankfully, Leading Saints has put together a remarkable resource called Liberating Saints. It's a virtual library with 25 plus presentations focused on helping leaders be better prepared to help someone overcome struggles with pornography. We cover topics like how to minimize shame in the bishop's office, how to talk with children about pornography, and even how to talk about female pornography use in Relief Society. If you'd like to review the Liberating Saints library at no cost for 14 days, simply go to leadingsaints.org/14. That's leadingsaints.org/14. While you're at it, we'll give you access to all of our virtual libraries that cover several leadership-related topics. So click the link in the show notes or simply visit leadingsaints.org/14. Today, I'm sitting down through the powers of the internet with Lisa Valentine Clark. How are you, Lisa?
I'm well, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Now, you there's no need for introduction here. I mean, especially if people can see who you are, because you are, you're not a stranger to the microphone, especially the radio or podcasts. And so, but for those few out there that maybe aren't as familiar with you, how would you introduce yourself?
Okay. Oh, wow. I'm a lot of things.
Okay. where to begin?
No, I know. No, just kidding. Right now I am the host of The Lisa Show on BYUradio. You can download that podcast or wherever you get podcasts. I also helped to write and produce, and I started as Carrie Carrington in Once I Was a Beehive and Once I Was Engaged. I've done a lot of different commercials. You might recognize me as the Chapbooks mom on the
that's right.
video. I used to host Random Acts, and I was on the TV show Show Offs that did improvisational comedy in a show. So I just keep myself busy. I'm the mom of 5, and I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. That's great. And I love to highlight your time as Carrie Carrington on the popular, I guess, just 2 movie, the Once I Was a Beehive and Once I Was Engaged. And that Once I Was a Beehive has been played over and over and over by my 9-year-old in our home, especially on Sundays. And it's like the first movie she ever cried in. And we got the chance to go to the premiere of Once I Was Engaged. She was so excited to get a picture with you and talk with you. And so you're very kind. So I told you sort of jokingly before, I want you to channel your inner Carrie Carrington, but because were you the Young Women's President in that movie?
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
Right. Okay.
Yep.
And you are currently a Young Women's President in real life, right?
I am in my ward in Edgemont, 6th Ward. Shout out. Yep.
Nice. And is this your first go at the Young Women's program, or?
I've been in presidencies before, but this is my first go as Young Women's President, although I've played one on TV.
That's right. You can say that. So that's awesome. And maybe break down as far as the demographics of your ward or the youth program in your ward, just to put that into context.
Yeah, you bet. I live in the heart of Utah County, and it's a big ward. I think it's the best ward. I've lived in that ward for many years, almost 2 decades, really. And our demographics is there's a lot of kids. You know, we have about 31 girls on our young women on our roster, and about as many young men as well. So it's a big family ward. It was when we moved in, there were, I think, maybe, and I had 3 kids at the time, went on to have 5, but I think my 3 kids made the primary a grand total of 15. And now there's, over 100 kids. And so it really turned over. It was kind of an older neighborhood. And as people passed away, then little families would, move in. So that's like a lot of older neighborhoods do. Just big turnout. Because once you move into the Edgemont area, nobody wanted to move out. Nice.
And so how long have you been serving as Young Women's President now?
It's been almost a year.
Oh, cool. And is there a story to being called as Young Women's President?
Well, it was kind of a shock because I was not even a year. My husband passed away in June of 2020, and the bishop was a really good friend of his, a good friend of mine. And I think he felt really bad calling me. Like, I know this is a lot. You've kind of been through a lot.
Yeah. Leave the widow alone.
Got a little
right?
emotional about it. And I was like, listen, we both know why we're here. Well, I know the church that I belong to. So just let's get this going. You can ask me. And he's like, are you sure I can ask you? So, nice. and he's been great, because the bishop and the young women's president have to work together a lot to coordinate the youth schedule and stuff. And so it's been a really great experience. And the young women in my ward are incredible, and they're all super different and fun, and they're great.
Yeah. And so walking into that experience, like you said, serving in young women's presidencies before, is anything that surprised you, or is there a certain way you went about selecting your counselors, anything like that?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because it is different, like being the one in charge, right? And the young women and the youth and children's program in the church has changed a lot. Yeah. That was the biggest surprise for me, is before, when we were in, and you're doing your young woman's medallion and talking about personal progress and all of that, and then you have camp requirements, and you got to learn CPR, and like there was so much to that program. And the new program, for those who don't know, is just totally like no, where it's to the basics of the gospel. What do the girls want? It's the young women led. Like, what goals are you working on personally? Like, there's no checklist. It's like, what in these 4 areas of your life do you want to work on? And then everything goes around that. And so it's not leaders preparing lessons for the girls to teach the girls, or coming up with activities to try to convince the girls to go, but it's going to the actual young women and saying, what is that buy-in for you? Why are we here? What is the purpose of this? What do you want to get out of it? And because every ward is different and every girl is different, it really accounts for that. And it's hard to change. And that was, I think, one of the biggest problems. Like, as the president, I was like, oh, no. Like, now I have all these like leaders and young women who have a different idea about where this is going, and to try to bring everybody together is quite difficult. But as far as the counselors were concerned, just being really, really prayerful about it, because there were so many like qualified and like great women in my neighborhood and in my ward who, the young women would benefit from associating with. So, but it was nice. I'm really happy with the presidency that we have, and they have been so great just to me personally, and not, in addition to being great leaders for the young women. So it's great when that happens. Yeah.
And we're recording this in February of 2022. Do you feel like your ward is, finding some routine after sort of the COVID shutdown and whatnot with youth activities, or how does that work for your ward?
I think the routine is the idea of like just not getting up, giving up. I feel so bad for the previous young women's presidency, because for the majority of their final 2 years, it was Zoom and trying to connect. And they did such a good job of finding out of the box ways to make that connection with the girls, even though we couldn't physically, be together, because I had some young women just in my home. So I saw the lengths that they went to make those kind of connections. So now that, everything kind of opened up, but then it shut down again. Yeah. And then our ward had like an outbreak. And then we were like, okay, we can't have any, we got to be careful. We got to shut down. Now we're going to do this on Zoom, and just being flexible in that. I mean, it's a great reminder anyway in the gospel too, of like, you have to relate to the individual needs of your ward, of your, particular people that you're serving. When you are trying to fulfill the calling, and it's not a checklist, you got to focus on those individuals. So it's been tricky.
Yeah. Well, as we do with these How I Lead interviews, is you've prepared just a list of some principles that maybe have helped you in your leadership, and we'll go through those and see what we can explore and learn here. The first one being belief in the purpose. How do you do that?
Well, I feel like, especially in a church calling, like when you're trying to lead people, you're not trying to get them to do something, in another leadership position, like say at work or in school or even in a family too. Sometimes you just have to get things done, right? Like, and it's sort of a checklist, but I just really feel, and especially as a young women's president, of just believing and having that of the why of you're doing it. There's a lot of meetings. This is a lot of time. It's a very emotional and, heavy sort of responsibility. And I feel like keeping that focus is what keeps everybody motivated for whatever their individual why is together as a collective. Mm-hmm. So whenever we talk about, the specifics for activities or lessons or what, camp, whatever it is, as a presidency, we're always coming back to, well, why are we doing this? We're all very, very busy. We're all being pulled in different directions and all of that. And so what is this belief? And if we didn't feel that, then the girls and the young women that we serve wouldn't feel that as well. And I think sometimes we forget that. We always just assume everyone's on the same page. Not everybody's on the same page. And I think that that's where good leadership begins, in any really organization, that you are all here with the same kind of vision and purpose, even if you're going to execute it differently.
Yeah. And so is there any example that comes to mind as far as what that looks like in practice with because it sort of gets this momentum and going in one direction, you realize that it's sort of it's turned into a monster at times. I don't know, but any idea what that looks like in practice as far as keeping the purpose at the core and making sure everybody agrees with that purpose?
Yeah, absolutely. So there was a time where, because of the holidays and because of COVID, we had sort of stopped and started a lot of activities that we wanted to do to bring the girls together. And we hadn't had an opportunity to do that for a while. So it was the first time that we were getting together for a bit. And I realized that as we were generating ideas for, well, what kind of activities do we want to do? That because so much time had passed, that some of the girls were new and had never been in young women's organizations. Some of the girls had kind of been in and out, and some of the girls had been there for a really long time. So we had a wide range. And so the activities that they were suggesting, they didn't even know how to brainstorm for those ideas. Like, what is this even? And so we as a presidency took a step back and said, okay, we're just going to have a discussion on, why do you come to Young Women's? Like, what do you hope to get out of this? Like, maybe your parents make you come.
Yeah. Honest, right?
Maybe you don't have anything better to do. Maybe you love this. Maybe you wish that it meant more, that this could be your way to get a testimony of different principles. Maybe you want this as a way to serve other people. Maybe you just need it as a social outlet. Because you feel isolated, whatever it is. And so then we really talked about the why and how everyone is an individual, no matter what their why is that we come together and what is this belief and this purpose. And we brought it together as, why I come to church, why I would spend a lot of hours every week for something I don't get paid for and feel so passionately about it, and why I would do that at this time of my life where I'm a new widow for a lot of kids, starting a new career, why I would do this, not like, oh, I'm so great, but also just to say, like, I'm not just killing time kind of thing. And so having that belief, I think it changed our discussions, and it changed the way that we were planning activities. Like, we all get to be together. Isn't this so great? Like, I want to be here with you. So what do we want to do with that? You know? And I feel like that could go in any organization, really, of like, we have this opportunity at this moment in time that will never happen again. So what are we going to do with this?
Yeah. And so you had that discussion like with all the girls?
Yeah.
Nice. And I was curious, do you remember any specific as far as how they responded, like why they come to Young Women's, or what they expected?
Yeah, because I'm looking at these girls and I know them as individuals, and I'm thinking, yeah, you come because your mom makes you. Yeah. You come because you have a testimony. You come because you're trying to figure things out. You're coming because you want to change the world. Like you kind of guess, but you want them to answer that for themselves. Yeah. And I wanted them to have permission of like, it's okay, you're invited. Like, no matter what it is, I just kind of wanted to call it out of like, we are glad you are here.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's such an interesting approach to maybe engaging with the young women, is asking them that question. And like you say, giving them permission to say, you know what, I just need a social outlet, or I have a lot of fun at the activities, or because as a leader, we sometimes, we have this priority and this almost this mandate of like, you will engage with Jesus Christ here, and I will assure you that will happen, when that's something you almost can't force.
Yeah, you can't force it. No, and that's not the way Christ taught either.
Right, yeah.
What did he do? Is he invited.
Yeah.
He always invited, and he made room at the table for everyone. And, he reached out to the one. And that's what we need to do as well. And like I say, it doesn't matter where you're coming on the spectrum of, belief or confidence or anything, you are invited.
Yeah.
And you don't have to tell us why, but we are glad when you can come.
Yeah. And when you've given the girls an opportunity to articulate why they come, I think that helps you as a leader as the activities go on, where maybe you can sense that one girl really isn't into this activity, but she also sort of just sees Young Women's as a social outlet. And so you may not want to push as hard there, maybe as others who really want to learn, or I don't know, whatever it is. And so you can really gauge your leadership approach with that information.
And I think that once you're all on the same page with that, then you can be more effective too as a presidency.
Yeah. Anything else in the context of belief in the purpose that we haven't touched on?
Well, I just feel like that, especially serving in the church, your belief in your why in doing it. And, for me personally, I feel like where much is given, much is required. And I feel like that this is an expression of me just trying to give a small little tiny bit to the great volume that's been given. And I always try to remember that it is a privilege to be with these girls. Like that's a privilege for me to be able just to have some influence on them.
Yeah. Yeah. And speaking of that, the next principle you have is focusing on the individual. How do you go about doing that as a Young Women's president?
Well, I think that's the first thing that I learned, especially as a Young Women's president, is that all of these girls are very different. And especially from the ages that you're dealing with them from, 11 to 18, they want to be individuals. They're trying to establish their own identity as it relates to their peers, to their families, their parents, any authority figure. And you're kind of that as well. And they don't want to be treated all the same. And because none of us do. None of us want to feel like we're being treated as a stereotype, like, oh, all you women in the church or all you men in the church, or like nobody likes that when you're all grouped together. You're like, but I'm different. And the young women are certainly like that. And their individual personalities and being able to be focused on that instead of what are we going to have the girls do this Wednesday for the activity, or what are we going to teach the girls is an entirely different question than specifically what does she need right now? What is she going through? Yeah. What is she struggling with? And then being able to see each individual young woman as their own person on their own journey is much more effective than dealing in hypotheticals. And so that's what, I really try to remember. I know every single young woman who doesn't show up on Sunday or on the, and I try to think of where they are and what they need and how I can help them, whether or not they want to come to church.
Yeah. And do you have any practices or routines that you do in order to sort of keep a pulse on each individual, like formal one-to-one interviews or anything you do, maybe more casual, or how do you do that?
We try to make it a little bit, more casual as we were kind of trying to get to know everybody. I think that's why Girls Camp is so great too, because it gives you that time just to sit with each girl and just to be like, I just want to get to know you. What do you think is funny? What are your life goals? What are your friends like? What do you worry about? What are you good at? What makes you really excited and passionate, and that kind of concentrated time is really, really great. And I think beyond that, knowing that we have a presidency, right? And each class, there's 3 classes in Young Women's, has an advisor because we have a big enough ward. And each class also has a specialist. So you have 3 adult leaders in each class that are watching over those girls and being able in each class to say, let's pray for each one of these girls by name every day. You can do that when there's that many adults, and you can say, okay, so let's keep an eye out for each girl so that nobody gets lost through the cracks. So for example, we might have, a class of like 8 people. And if we have 3 adults, then that's, every adult has 2 or 3 girls that they're going to know when their birthday is and when they're in the school play or when they have a sporting event. They're going to know the details of their life, not in a inappropriate way, but just like know what's going on.
Right.
And it's the same thing with the girls who who don't come but are on the list of like, do we know the situation? Do they feel invited and not pestered? Do they feel welcome without feeling, pressure? That is a difficult thing. And so we spend time not talking about, well, this is what we do, in these situations. We send everybody the same note and a cookie saying, please come. No, we try to think, well, what does each person need? Will that note feel like pressure? Like there was a woman in our girl in our neighborhood that was like, please take me off of the group texts for every activity and things like that. And I went over to her house and I was like, absolutely. Like, we don't want to bug you and stuff. We just want you to feel like if you ever want to come and hang out with the girls in your neighborhood and not feel left out, we don't want you to feel like left out. And we just want you to be aware of that. And we had a great discussion. And I felt like that was more effective than just, taping a 3x5 card to her door.
Yeah. That's awesome. Next principle is lead by example. How do you do that?
Well, I feel like I have taken a step back as a young women's president and thought, what impact have the leaders that I had in Young Women's 100 years ago had on me? And really the biggest lessons that they taught me, the things that I have taken on that have been the most meaningful, like little moments for me, were things that were not structured. They weren't lessons. They weren't even formal activities. It was just me watching them and what they did in the situation. And what's interesting about that is when you're young, you don't know. You think you know what your life's going to be like. You're like, well, I'll probably go to college and graduate and get married and have babies and then do this. And maybe I'll have this career. Or, you kind of think that you're going to follow. You have no idea. Like my life there's been a lot of things that have happened that I was like, oh, I did not see that coming. Not even a little bit. And yet I can look back and now with a deeper appreciation, remember some of my young women's leaders and the way that they were just unapologetically, because I came from the Midwest, just who they were, did their thing in a lot of different kind of life circumstances. And I have that example has helped me in so many ways that I would never have foretold, right? Yeah. Or predicted. And so it's like in hindsight, they have given me such a gift that I didn't know. And so sometimes then when I look at these young women and I think, oh, almost like with heartbreak, you have no idea because I don't know what's going to happen to you, but there's so many things that could happen to you. And so believe me when I say that I will always care about you and what happens to you. And I always want to be like a touchstone or a resource, or I just want to be on your team cheering you on no matter what happens. And those lessons happen by just living your life. It's just by living your life and nothing else, And I still have connections to young women who are now grown and married and have their own babies and stuff, like when I was in a young women's presidency before, and we're still in touch and that kind of connection, that it's just by living your life that if you walk the walk and talk the talk, you can't fake that. And they're watching. Yeah. And I think any good leader recognizes that it's not just a moment of leadership, but it's how do you live your life? And to me, especially in a gospel setting, that cannot be underestimated ever.
Yeah, there's so much hope that I think that brings to maybe a discouraged young women's president, because sometimes we put so much effort and focus on this upcoming youth conference or this fireside that we're doing, and we've got to make sure that everything's in line so that it's impactful for them. But over time, I think the influence we have on those that we lead is often manifested in just the person-to-person relationship we had, them understanding who we are, our faith, our struggles, all these things. And then in hindsight, we look back and think, wow, what a remarkable person. I was blessed to have them in my life. Right?
I had if I can share a story about that.
Please.
My late husband, when we moved into our ward 19 years ago, he was soon after called to be the teacher quorum president or,
advisor or whatever.
Advisor, whatever. And there were a group of unruly youth that he would just refer to lovingly as the monkeys. Like, oh, the monkeys are driving me crazy. The monkeys didn't listen to my lesson. The monkeys keep teasing me about being bald. The monkeys, this group of boys. And over the years, my husband, of course, loved these guys. They were fun, and he went on scout trips with them and went to activities and lessons. And these guys grew up, and they grew up, and then they would kind of come back, and it used to drive me nuts because we were like this struggling, like young couple with, lots of little kids and stuff. And he'd be like, well, the monkeys want me to buy him tacos. The monkeys, on every Tuesday or whatever. And I'd be like, oh, those guys. But they would do that. And he invested in their life anyway. Fast forward, my husband is sick. These men, these boys, some of them went on missions. Some of them got married, had babies.
Yeah.
When my husband got really sick with ALS, they came over and made him laugh. They came over and raked our leaves for us, took care of us. They honored him in such a way and honored our family and became and I know that was because Christopher saw them for who they really were and just loved them and joked around with them and throughout their lives, even when he didn't have that calling, even when he was in the bishopric, or then after that, he didn't have a calling, and they still it was that leadership that they came to him for advice, for the rest of their lives. And after he passed, they still, it's going to make me like cry. They come over and they bring me flowers. They talk about the influence that my husband had on him. And if we are talking about like changing lives and real leadership, I feel like that secret sauce that Christopher Clark had was he just lived his life. How he was with those boys was how he was with his friends, which was how he was with his colleagues. And it was just all the same example.
Oh, I love that. That's so powerful. And again, gives so much hope of just connect, be yourself and encourage. And if that, Wednesday night activity just was a dumpster fire, so be it, move on. And they love you anyways.
And joking around, it can make a difference. It's okay.
Yeah, that's cool. Let's see. I wanted to ask you about that dynamic. It's sort of newer, and not that your ward has figured it out or you and your bishop have, but just that dynamic between the young women's president and the bishop, and, watching over youth and how meetings work and how he involves you. Like, how does that dynamic work in your ward?
It's really funny because our bishop, our bishopric was called just a couple of months before I was called. Mm-hmm. And so we're all kind of new and we're all contemporaries, and we all just were like, okay, how are we going to do this? And it's changed a lot. So like we should be meeting every week. And I know, just because my husband had been in a couple of bishoprics, how many meetings and how much time away from your family. And I want to be really respectful of that. And so, for us, I think we have really open communication. And we text and we call and we have formal meeting and just whatever will work. And I think really being flexible as everyone's trying to figure this out is the most important. I really do. And if there's ever a concern, the thing that I like about the dynamic that we have going on is I feel like we are on the same page, that if he doesn't understand something or where I'm coming from, he asks and listens to my perspective and vice versa, so that we can come to a consensus before we go out to the youth. And so I feel like that has made a world of difference and especially like in ward councils and things where it's not just, well, what do you guys think? It's a real discussion about let's work this out until we come to a consensus.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome.
Respectful.
What about girls camp? Any hacks you have or suggestions or approaches, unique things you do? Anything coming to mind?
Here's the thing. I hate camping. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. I don't like roughing it and outdoors. And it's so funny because I have such a testimony of girls camp because of it, and wanted to honestly make the movie for this point as well, that something magical does happen at girls camp, and I'm willing to do it. And I always tell the girls, if I'm willing to go camping, it's like, I'm going to make it fun. And I do. I think my tip is just to have fun and to do it your own way. So I don't like sleeping outside and the tents and stuff. I do it, But like, I like the food. I like making the s'mores. I like the dance parties. I like just being with the girls. So I lean into and try to focus on all those strengths.
Yeah.
I like the fun hikes and when you come up with your own mottos and chants and songs, and like, I like all that cheesy stuff. So I just lean into it and go overboard,
Yeah. Yeah, it's only a few days, right? I mean,
it's only a few days. And I always just say, like, listen, we all like different parts of it. So, I mean, I had to ask one of the young women to help me set up my tent. I was like, this is driving me nuts. I can't set this up. And she's like, I got you, Sister Clark. Like, I got you. And I was like, thank goodness you do. See, this is why we need each other.
That's
I'm
right.
good at fighting in the metaphor where, enforcing it.
Yeah.
But,
yeah. What about any like apps or tech services or technologies you use within your presidency or with the girls, or any tool you use?
You are asking the wrong question, because we have been so frustrated by this. And it's funny because I'm on like group chats with other young women presidents and things like that.
Yeah.
And we all have this problem because it depends on, because not all the young women have phones.
Right.
Some of them have iPhones, some of them have Android. And you would think, oh, no big deal. It's a huge deal. And especially when you're dealing with large numbers of people. We've tried to use GroupMe it's so hard because every time, because it changes so much, right? Because girls grow up and go out, and then sometimes you have parents on the thread and they're like, we don't want to be on this thread. And now I'm on 3 threads because I have 2 different girls and then a presidency. It's a mess. If anyone has any help, please tell me. But all I can say is don't give up.
Yeah.
We've created lots of different texting groups and a website where, like, if nothing else, go to the website and it will always have like updated information of like, what are we doing this week? Or who do I contact? Or where's that form? We just try to dump it on one website. So
nice.
It's still a huge work in progress. I'll tell you what.
So with that website, do you just use some free web developing app and then get a website up?
Yep.
And you have announcements like the next activity? What else do you have on there?
Yeah, and if there's stuff about FSY or girls camp and they need to know dates and stuff, we'll go to the website and it'll have our calendar and all that. But I mean, over communication has really been what we've hoped to achieve. So everybody feels confident, but everyone wants a different level of involvement, and that is another issue.
Right. Yeah, because maybe I don't want a text from my young women's president every day, right?
Yeah, maybe you don't.
and I think that's a good tip here, just having I think the principle there is like having a home base online, whether that's a Facebook group or a texting group or whatever, but having a home base saying whatever the question, it should be there. And if it's not, tell us and we'll get it there, right?
And and there's lots of rules about, giving out people's numbers and things like that. And leaders can't just directly text young women, and you have to have other people in the thread. And so just being aware of those things, once you got to do what really works for your ward. And it depends on the individual girls and how many people you're talking about. Yeah.
Awesome. Really helpful. So I want to make it sort of a left turn a little bit, just with your experience with your losing your husband, Chris, to ALS. And, he was such a influence in the local community here at Utah, especially the theater community. I'm trying to think, was he Peter in the Bible videos?
Paul.
That's what I meant to say. Paul. Yeah. So if anybody needs to see him in his element there, he was Paul there. And obviously nobody expects to lose their husband in such a heartbreaking way at a younger age. I think we all imagine growing old and holding hands as old people and passing away at 99 on the same day, right? Like that would be ideal.
Just lie down in a bed together holding hands. That's what I thought was going to happen.
That's right. And so obviously throughout his sickness, I mean, there's suddenly more and more need that your family has and help. And then when he passes and then there's just this heaviness of like, I don't know, do I go over to the Clark's house? Do they want me there? And maybe they do, maybe they don't, but I want to show that I care. No, I'll just give them their space. And, there's all these dynamics that I think in the context of a ward we're wrestling with. And so just from your experience, obviously there's no one size fits all, but just from your experience, what did you learn that maybe would help church leaders who have someone in their ward going through something similar?
That's a great question, because I do think we need to talk about this stuff because it happens more often than not. And so with ALS, he slowly lost the ability to do a lot of things, right? So for people who are unfamiliar, so he went from like walking with a cane to at the end not being able to move at all or speak. And so there were a lot of stages, and we were constantly updating our home, for handicapped accessibilities and for his treatment. So people coming in and out. Mm-hmm. So our needs changed. And I think that's an important point of really knowing what the needs are and not just assuming, right? So like in my case, also, like Christopher is one of 9 siblings. Oh, wow. I am one of 5 siblings. Most of our family lives close, and our family really rallied, and we have really great friends. And the way that I understand the way that the church operates best is that you start and try to take care of your own family's needs. And then if you have needs, you go out to your extended family. And then after your extended family, you go out a little bit to your close friends. And then if you have needs beyond that, then you go to your neighborhood or your ward, your spiritual, And so that felt very comfortable to me as we needed more and more help. And what was so lovely is we have such a great, lovely ward and we'd been there for so long and so many good friends that they would just say, yeah, I don't know. Am I coming over too much or not? Or what do you tell me? And we had actually a family spokesperson who happened to be my cousin who lived in the ward, and her husband was the bishop right before the bishop that we had while Chris was ill. So we said this would be great. We'll just have Nate and Julie because they're family, be the spokesperson for the ward. So when we find ourselves in a stressful situation and we need meals or we need, help with physical therapy, whatever it was, then we will. And we had a sweet bishop who about every 6 months would just check in on me and say, hey, I know that this is an expensive disease. Like, do you need any financial help? And he would ask specific questions like, I don't want to step on your toes and things like that, but what can I do? And so I felt like people were checking in with us enough because we were self-sufficient in a way, in the sense of we had so much family helping us that I had a sister who really stepped in and helped with the home repair. I had, a brother who helped generously pay for a lot of the adaptations to our home, which were quite extensive. Things like that. We had, insurance for his disability. So something, everybody's situation is going to be different, and it's so personal and it's so heart-wrenching when you're going through it too. And even though when people are sometimes asking for help, it feels so intrusive because you have to tell them the whole situation and then you have to look at it. And sometimes you're just trying to survive. So having a family, I think representative of one person who can just kind of field all the questions was very, very helpful. Now, our experience was quite extreme because for the last almost a year of Christopher's life, we were in isolation and he couldn't get anything like a cold or a flu or anything. Yeah. So we had to really severely limit who could come to our home. And as a result, I really relied on my, it was just my little family. And that could come in and no one else could really come in. So that was quite a severe thing. And so we really needed a lot of fasting and prayers, and I laugh, but I don't underestimate that. We really did, call out for that. And that's how, people could help. And, what's interesting too, is the people who just knew what to do were the people who had been through similar tragedies. There's a widow who's also a really good friend, and she had been widowed for about 10 years before I was. And she just was my friend. We're about the same age and everything. And she had been through that. And she'd be like, what can I do to help you today? And I'd say, nothing, I'm fine. Everything's fine. We're just, nothing, it's just a regular day or whatever. And she would know when I had a doctor's appointment or something like that, and dinner would be there. She wouldn't ask for my permission, because I'd be like, well, we have food and I can make food. It's fine. But she's like, sometimes you just want to not think about it. And she just kind of knew those things that even I didn't know because she had been through it. So there's something very significant about that that makes a ward family a little bit different than just a neighborhood because they know. Yeah. And they're looking to express their gratitude for their God and their belief in ways, and because they're looking for it and they're thinking about it in a different way than just your average person. They do answer the prayers that you haven't even uttered yet because you're too busy. Yeah.
Man, there's so many principles there you mentioned. I think it's really important to highlight that family dynamic you touch on, that sometimes we have this this storybook narrative, I guess, in our mind as far as what ministering brothers and sisters do for families, right? And now you have a medical need. And so here we are, like we're ready to step in there and be the superhero and help out in so many ways. In reality, you don't necessarily need an overwhelming amount of help from the ward because you have an overwhelming amount of help from your family that's just down the street, right? And so, and I remember my mom going through a medical issue for a time, and there's sort of this feeling from her ministry, like from those that ministered to her, like, no, you need to give us something we can do for you, because that is our job now. Yeah. And there is this, it's very natural, I think, for people to not ask for help when they probably really do need help. But I think that family dynamic is so important to keep into perspective, realizing that maybe there isn't a lot for the ward to do day to day or week to week, because they have this support that's already there from their family, and that's okay.
And, and that's okay, because I still feel very close to my ward, and I still feel like they were there for us. Yeah. It wasn't like, they were there for us. And the things that you need when you're going through that crisis is like, let me talk about my husband. Let me talk about how horrible that was. Help mourn with me. And that's a very real thing, but we're much more comfortable bringing out and dropping off a casserole than sitting and crying with a new widow who's like, what am I going to do now? I feel awful, and I don't think I'll ever be happy again. Like, that's uncomfortable.
Right.
But the women and the men who can do that and who'd have done that for me, just sit with me in my helplessness and my grief, man.
Yeah.
That's ministering.
Right.
I don't need a casserole. Right. I really don't. Like, I love it. I love food. Like, give me food. But let's crack it wide open. And because I relied so much on my brothers and sisters, especially, like, my brothers and sisters saved me in ways in physical, emotional, spiritual ways. They each one of them, not all of them are members of our church. So half of them are, and half of them aren't. And we came together and bonded in a beautiful way. And that was God's evidence. It was evidence of God's love. And I really just feel like that was such a sacred experience, and still continue. And I still see the benefit of that. And my children saw it. My children saw that, and they were like, oh, that's how siblings show up for each other. Oh, we do that for each other now. And and that lesson that my kids, that they are bonded together, especially now that they, only have one parent, has been such an amazing example of love and the principle of eternal families. Talk about basic gospel principles that they have a testimony of, that I'm so grateful for.
Yeah. And you mentioned just this concept of, people offering and showing empathy, because I think as humans, and maybe it's exaggerated in a religious context, but we have this overwhelming feeling of, we just want you to feel good and happy. And and so it's like, I want to say something, or I want to do something that makes you happy. But in reality, things like this, they just hurt, and they're supposed to hurt. And they're probably just going to hurt for a while.
Okay. But it's so nice though, when someone does come to you and says, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And I was just thinking about you, and, here's some chocolate or some flowers, or a casserole, whatever it is. Like, yeah, you can have the thing. But the thing is, I just wanted you to know I was thinking of you, and I hate this for you. That, especially I learned this in such a dramatic way because we were in COVID. We couldn't be together physically. I was mourning by myself. I had a funeral without my friends hugging me and surrounding me. It was so isolating, and just absolutely the cruelest way to mourn. Absolutely isolated. But I felt the love of my friends and my family and my ward. I did feel it. That is a real thing. When people are saying, I feel so awful, I'm thinking about you, sending you a text, sending you, those little things that you think, should I do that? Oh, no, it's dumb. It's just a little thing. Just do it. Just send it and then let it go. It's always better just to do the thing than not do the thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's what, as members of the church, we're good at.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know if this is, I don't want to construct something that's not there, but with this calling as young women's president, I think it's easy for leaders to maybe think like, oh, Lisa, she's widowed now, she has all those kids, she's working, like, let's not burden her with one more thing. But has this calling been a good outlet for you, or something that sort of gives you additional purpose, or was that sort of taken care of?
I've gotten that a lot. Like, they called you? Like, doesn't your bishop know? And I'm like, oh my gosh, my bishop, like, just could barely get the words out. He felt so bad, but we both felt so strongly about it. And I really did. I felt it coming. And I really feel like that was the Spirit saying, this is it. The thing that I've learned about myself and about life is, this is it. You don't get wonderful circumstances like to unroll your life. It's happening right now. Get on board. It's happening.
Yeah.
And if you don't participate, you'll miss it. So like, I mean, when Christopher was sick and it was at the worst time, right? Because all my kids were at home and they were little. We've got 5 kids. We're in the middle of it. We're trying to like send kids off into the world. Like, this is the worst time. And then when he was really sick and dying, I was like, oh, we're in a global pandemic. We can't have any of our therapists. We had like 7 therapists at the time coming in to help us keep him happy. None of them can come. No, this is the worst time ever. So when I was called, like, you're newly grieving, new single mom of 5 kids. Yeah, let's give you a huge calling while you're trying to figure out your new career. No, like, this is the worst time. But it seemed like the Lord's plan for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I do feel like, again, I do feel like life happens and you can fight against it or you can just jump into it. Either way, no matter what you choose or don't choose, it's going to be hard. And that's okay. And it's okay. And so I think, is this the perfect time for me to do this calling? That's not how my life has gone. That's not what I have learned. So maybe asking someone who has had it happen a little bit more linearly, or I don't know, more organized. To me, I felt like, and I mean this is no disrespect or sacrilege at all. I really don't. I mean it like true, that I do feel like our Heavenly Father has a really perfect sense of humor. And I feel like a lot of, my life, because I want to look for the funny and I want to look like is it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. Yes, this is horrible. Also, look over here. It's going to be both, and it's okay. Don't deny yourself an opportunity for growth and learning and fun and all of this because you're so loyal to this idea of how you should grieve or how life should be, or now you should just have it easy because you went through this really, really hard thing.
Yeah.
Don't be too married to that idea of pain and suffering is spirituality and, you know what I mean? And maturity. It's just, that's not true.
Yeah, that's really helpful. And just this sort of that fallacy of the perfect time, like we can't calculate that too much into our decision making, even as leaders, because this is how God sanctifies people, is inviting them into callings at times. It seems like it's the worst time.
And all you're asked to do is to do your best. You're not asked to do it perfectly.
Yep.
And you're not asked to do it alone. So.
Awesome. Well, Lisa, this has been great. I want to make sure we highlight just sort of a new direction that your show's headed in.
Thanks.
You were a daily show, but now you're putting all your emphasis on once a week. Maybe break it down. Tell us people more about your show and where they can access it and what to expect.
Yeah, thank you. The Lisa Show is a weekly podcast, and it's a real place for connection. We want people. We know that there's a lot of information out there, right? When you have questions about how to live your life and the things you struggle with and the things that you kind of want and you don't really know where to go. And we try to sift through all of that information and find you the very best stuff so that, and it's fun and it's funny because that's how life is, right? So we hope that we're going to give you lots of different ideas by having real conversations. So we just really want you to join into the conversation to be able to laugh about our successes and our failures, and then to also be able to get some good ideas about how to live your best life. So, our first episode was about mom guilt, why we have it, how we can get rid of it. The episode that is released on today, on February 15th, is how to get out of a slump. We've got an episode coming up about deepening your partner, your connection with your partner. We've got one about how to be the fun parent. We've got one coming up about like how to make friends as an adult or how to find a creative outlet. So lots of different kind of topics. It's a fun time. And you can download the Lisa Show podcast at BYUradio or wherever you get your podcasts. So like, Spotify and Apple podcasts. And I hope everybody will just give it a shot and subscribe and And let me know what you think, because we really do want it to be a conversation. Like, leave a review or we're on social media and ask questions about, the things that you're worried and concerned about, or respond to an episode. And to me, that's really, really fun. And I respond to all the messages. So
yeah,
let's have a conversation.
Awesome. Perfect. Well, I hope people check it out. And obviously they're listening to this, so they probably know where to listen to stuff. So awesome. Well, Lisa, last question I have for you is, as you reflect on your time as a leader, how has being a leader helped you become a better follower of Jesus Christ?
I feel like being a leader, specifically a young women's president, has helped me realize the great love that our Heavenly Father, that Jesus Christ have for us as individuals, that they know us individually and they love us so much. And I feel like when you're in a position of leadership, you get to feel a little bit of that love, and that helps you to answer some of the prayers and the concerns that the people that you serve feel. And what a benefit to feel that love.
And that concludes this How I Lead interview. I hope you enjoyed it. And I would ask you, could you take a minute and drop this link in an email, on social media, in a text, wherever it makes the most sense, and share it with somebody who could relate to this experience. And this is how we develop as leaders, just hearing what the other guy's doing, trying some things out, testing, adjusting for your area. And that's where great leadership's discovered, right? So we would love to have you share this with somebody in this calling or a related calling, and that would be great. And also, if you know somebody, any type of leader who would be a fantastic guest on the How I Lead segment, reach out to us. Go to leadingsaints.org/contact. Maybe send this individual an email letting them know that you're going to be suggesting their name for this interview. We'll reach out to them and see if we can line them up. So again, go to leadingsaints.org/contact, and there you can submit all the information and let us know. And maybe they will be on a future How I Lead segment on the Leading Saints podcast. And remember, go to leadingsaints.org/14 to access our full Liberating Saints virtual library.